Hey, good morning all. Here's another members only video, right? So obviously we've been tracking the Euro USD move, and what I want to do is just let's get rid of kind of all of these, right? And we kind of come back to, what we'd said about, I'll leave these off for now, obviously, although I've already got them there. This is the daily, the weekly, the monthly range. So what I want to do is just kind of highlight, turn the fractals off as well. And I just want to kind of go through, what I'm looking at, why I'm looking at what I'm looking at currently, right? So first things first, it's going to be really quick, right? I don't want to be, kind of fuss-arsing with this. I've covered this in the last couple of videos, and this is just kind of almost the update. But I just want to go back to kind of square one, really, right? So you kind of know what I'm looking at. So the biggest thing for me is I've zoomed out, right? We've got this, kind of major downtrend overall, right? That's the kind of the first thing that's kind of in my eyes, right? That's the first thing that catches my eye. So overall for me, right, is the monthly, bigger picture down. Therefore, I'm starting from here. We've got obviously lower lows, lower highs, and then we come down to this kind of major low, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working from the major low. So we've got this major low monthly. We've come up, we've come down. We then failed to make a new high here. We come down, we failed to make a new low, make a new high, but still didn't take this one out, right? So at the moment, we got this kind of, kind of sideways action move. Then we come down and make the new low, right? So at this particular point, what I'm seeing is we've got kind of, a move here. We've got a move there, right? Followed by this move down. And then we make this low. And all of a sudden, this one takes out these, right? This is what we're doing, right now live. So we now have an argument for this obviously going up, right? There's one argument for that. I'm not saying that's what it's doing. I'm not saying that's what I like. I'm saying there's one argument for this. There's a couple of factors that need to play out for that to be, almost confirmed, right? And therefore, one of the things for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the magnet tool on. I'm going to come to this high. I'm going to press shift, drag my cursor across, and leave that line on there, right? Now, obviously, I can mark this up. Sometimes, again, if you're new to this and you kind of finding out, what you're trying to do, it's always useful. And you can say, prior monthly high, for example. Well, if I could spell, there we go. Right. So, for example, and I'm just going to drag that across so it doesn't stick in my way. Right. Now, what I want to see, obviously, for this to be a new uptrend or at least the break of the trend, is ideally the close in 19 days, right, up and above this level. So this, in its simple form, is right now I like the larger picture downtrend. However, even as a pullback phase, right, we have obviously now broken this particular high, right? So I'm not looking at this and saying, right, where are we going? Why are we going? What are we doing? My first note is this is a prior monthly high. If we stick above that high, right, I'm going to start looking at, are there potential long setups based on, much bigger picture. Now, this obviously is without the indicators. I can stick stochastic on and say, well, there is room to the upside on the monthly. That's going to be interesting. And of course, if we do come up again, right, in terms of the monthly move, we got to look to the left in terms of, what else could be available without really changing the trend, right? Now, if we obviously do this, the other thing we have is in terms of that range that made the low, we've obviously got this particular high, right? So as I'm saying, look to the left. The next thing I want to do is mark out the swing low, right? And then this seems ridiculous because it's obviously ages and ages and ages away, right? We're talking about 1,200, 1,300 points from where we currently are. We then have this high, right? Now, these are the three, monthly moves. And this is why I mark it up and put this into its own kind of group in terms of the monthly swings, right? So what I'm looking at with this is monthly swing. For this to change for me in terms of being a proper uptrend, right? It's this one for me that would need to break. And the reason for that is that because we had the swing down that obviously broke the prior structure, right? This could easily be deemed as a pullback, right? Now, we obviously have an auction area candle in there. We have another little baby one in there. That one for me broke the structure there. This one obviously broke the structure there. So they're both pretty valid in terms of pullback potential. The fact that we got the stochastic pointing up would probably push me more towards this one, bigger picture. But that's not to say weekly time frame we see a move down, then a move up, and then ultimately, potentially this, right? So what I want to do is just go through, kind of individual bits. Now, if I was to mark this up again, I'm going to put a little box on this candle, right? And I'm going to pull that out there. I'm going to do exactly the same thing on this one. I'm just using the magnet tool. So you press CTRL and you can click that on there. You just double check that was magnetized. Drag him across, right? Now, if I can put these in as one group, right? I'll put these in like this. I'll put this in as a group, and I'll put this in as, let's put monthly 2, right? So my current view on a month is this. Actually, I don't need this one. Right? So I'm trying to keep the charts pretty clean. I have it marked up again if I really wanted to, right? And maybe just to show you guys, I can put, monthly swing high. I'm going to put this of the range, right? And then I'm going to do a extreme low monthly, right? And that kind of gives me a good idea in terms of where I'm at, right? Now, I'm going to step down, and I'm just going to do the same thing over and over and over again, right? So we come down, obviously, here's the low on the weekly, right? Now, I'm just going to mark it out for now, right? This doesn't mean that this is where it's going to be, because I'm not going to use the same line twice. This is just for me to work in my mind in terms of how I'm looking at this, weekly structure, weekly move from here. So we come up, right? We then come back down. This one technically changes the character. We come straight back up, right? Now, this one is a bit more awkward because we fail the high, right? And we also fail the low. Now, we then come back down. So for me, at this particular stage, we've had a liquidity sweep to the downside. We've nothing on the upside, right? Which means the liquidity currently is still sat above there, right? And this is why I'm a bit more skeptical in terms of a continuation to the upside, in the grand scheme of things right now, is that we've swept the internal liquidity here, we're sweeping the external liquidity there, right? And therefore, I'm looking at this saying to myself, well, where are we? Bigger picture, the weekly stochastic is already in the overbought, already in this overbought situation, right? And therefore, even if we push up a little bit more daily, I'd like to see, at least the pullback phase, right? Given that I'm talking about this on a weekly stage, a weekly pullback could be, several weeks in terms of this type of move, right? So in the back of my mind, it's not turned bearish, but I'm not fully convinced in terms of bullish and bullish intent, right? And some people will argue, oh well, look at this bullish move, look at this bullish move, and there's nothing to say that we're not bullish. Right? I'm just saying, for me personally, what I like with this type of move is we've got this sweep of liquidity. We're ultimately needing a pullback, even in the worst case scenario, right? And therefore, I kind of like what I'm seeing right now in terms of nothing's changed, bigger picture. Nothing's really looking, like we're going to make some new grounds up high in terms of what I put, all the way up here on the monthly chart. And therefore, all I got to do is step down using the same logic, the same mechanical, kind of processes. And, later on, maybe I'll zoom out and look at something like an Elliott wave move and see where we are, bigger picture. But in the grand scheme of things, what I'm looking at right now is to see what are we doing from this weekly time frame, right? So weekly time frame, let's look at from now. We've had the low, right? And the reason I'm using this low, oh, I didn't magnetize that one. The reason that I'm using this low is that this low is the extreme from, from over here. So we then breach this high. We move up, we come back, we fail a low, we come up fractally, we come down, make a new low, right? Then we come up, we come down, we break the structure again. So at the moment, the momentum is to the upside, right? And that's kind of clear as day. So there's nothing really here in terms of any kind of short-term short until until we see a change of the character, right? So right now, in my my notes, in my kind of mental notes, if you will, I've got a monthly move that ultimately is technically a pullback. I've got a weekly move which is clearly up, and therefore I'm looking at this saying, well, I've got a larger monthly down with a slight pullback, and I now have a weekly which is clearly up. Right, so this is what I'm marking up, and this is just me making notes and talking to myself. As I've said in the last couple of streams, and as I've said in the last couple of posts, this is the monthly, this is clearly the weekly, right? And then I'm going to zoom down into that daily, right? So what I want to do before I go into the daily, I'm going to mark up the weekly. And again, this is just me talking to myself, right? I want you guys to kind of take note in terms of, what I'm looking at, why I'm looking at what I'm looking at, and any questions, just come back and put them into the technical question section. I know obviously I'm getting quite a few in the prop channel at the moment. So what I'm looking at right now is on a fractal point of view, right? We've got this low extreme created a new high, which ultimately created a new high over here, right? So although I could use this high, right? I personally like these because there was liquidity sitting there. Although it's not technically a double top, it's kind of close enough for me in terms of this type of time frame, right? So we now have, this high broken, and therefore I can mark this up at the current high, right? And I have the low extreme, which I know is the same as my monthly. This was just for me, making sense of it as I was talking through it. So what I'm now doing is I'm looking at these and saying, well, what have we got on a weekly point of view? I could probably let's put this one, as I just said, I like this one more. I could probably put this in, right? And then I could put this in maybe as a dashed line or something, again, for me to just make notes in terms of what we are. So given that the weekly is currently up, I'm not seeing any change, any momentum shift on the weekly, but I wouldn't expect that now for, a couple of weeks. So what I want to do is mark this up in the object tree. I'm going to put this as a new group, right? And this seems, very, very basic, very minimal in terms of the current situation there. This one is going to be a weekly 2, right? And then I'm going to hide the weekly 2 for now. Now what I'm going to do is step down into the daily, right? And, this process, you could even start on the daily. I mean, I'm looking at this because I'm looking for the bigger picture. I'm looking for a larger Aussie trade, bigger picture. And Aussie's going to follow a very similar analysis, both against the dollar. There's not really that much difference in the grand scheme of things. I just like the shorter time frames trading euro because it's a little bit more volatile. It's a little bit more violent in terms of going against retail traders. So I kind of like that in terms of a little bit more action on the smaller time frames. So now done on the daily, similar kind of thing, right? Let's use the local high instead of the other high that I just mentioned, right? So this is going to be my local high. I could probably mark this up as a local high daily, and I'm going to put this, in the middle, just to make it make sense, right? So now what I got is the extreme low, which obviously would be the swing low on the weekly time frame. I then can say to myself, right, well, we go up, we fail to break low, we literally come back. We kind of fail to make a high there until we break through this one green candle. We leave a lot of liquidity sitting there. We come back, we keep changing the structure, which means we have a pretty decent low there, right? And that low there, although I haven't magnetized it, I kind of get the gist. We also have the gaps sitting underneath this, right? So for me, there's a big point there in terms of liquidity, right? And I really like that in terms of the concept. We then come through, we break a new one, right? We then come back and we break a new one. Now, the next auction area for me is this one here, right? So it's this extreme candle there. And I'm just going to drag that out. Right, so we got this extreme there. I'm going to take this away just to clean up the chart. I'm going to take this away to clean up the chart. I could probably put one of two things. This one clearly broke the structure, right? and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to take the 2 candles because they're very small, and it's just me being lazy, right? So this is currently what I'm seeing. Make it pretty clean so it's nice when I come back. This is just me being fussy. And then a very similar thing, right? I can kind of magnetize from the bottom. I can magnetize technically from the top, and I can say, we've got some extreme situations on this daily time frame, right? So for me, even with a pullback, a pullback down into even into this kind of range, right, would still not take the prior highs, right? So even if we are in an uptrend on the monthly and we're going to continue on up, you'd still expect some kind of pullback. The options on the pullback, obviously here, right? A lot of liquidity sitting there, right? So if the trend to the monthly is extremely bullish, I'd expect the bigger liquidity to be grabbed before we make the move, right? Which, in technical terms, if we come from where we are, let's just say where we are right now, and we come to the 50% marker of that gap, we're still talking about 770 points, right? Which is not a bad trade, any which way. Now, again, similar kind of thing. Let me just mark these out. I know what I'm looking at. I know what I like with all of this. And therefore, new group. So you can see how I'm just kind of repeating the process, right? And obviously, if I wasn't doing this for video, this obviously was be a minute, maybe 2 minutes worth of brushing through, creating these little object tree kind of groups, and then I can literally come. Why is that not clicking? I wish I can change it this way instead. Rename. So this is daily 2. Right now, the cool thing with this, and what I want to do to kind of show you guys this, is if I zoom back out to say the weekly, this is my middle time frame that I've just covered. I can stick all 3 of these on all at the same time, and it'll kind of give me a bit of a review in terms of what I'm looking at, kind of why at any time frame. So if we come down, where's the down areas? If we go up, where would I expect some kind of reaction from? And therefore, keeping it kind of clean, keeping it simple, I can turn the monthly off, I can turn the weekly off, and I can do this then and use this on the smaller time frames, right? So skipping back down to, let's just say, a 4-hour time frame. Now, again, you could use daily, 4-hour, 15-minute. You can use weekly, daily, and say 4-hour. You could use, daily, 4-hour, 1 hour. This is where it becomes more personal to you, but the process and the concepts are exactly the same, regardless of the time frame. And to be fair, regardless of the instrument, right? Now, the only reason that I'm looking at this and not talking Wyckoff, not talking Elliott, not talking, kind of other techniques is I'm looking at this kind of shorter picture, right? The big play for me is obviously a bigger move up with things like Aussie and Euro. However, because we are grabbing the liquidity to the upside at the moment, I'm kind of seeing a larger term corrective move. And that larger corrective move still is several weeks in terms of the process. And therefore, between now and then, it's collecting that last move. So even if this is the kind of the inducement move that is pushing us up, you're still going to expect the pullback to grab liquidity before it kind of goes up altogether, right? This is kind of early buyers, early momentum. Probably, let me just check. If I come into sentiment on the Forex side, let's just have a little look at this. Let's take a little bit longer to load. I don't know what the issue is this morning. It must be OBS. I haven't updated it. So anyway, I'll come back to the chart. I'll go back to this in a second. So on a 4-hour time frame, similar kind of thing, right? We know from the daily that we're obviously moving up at the moment. We know from these green candles that we're moving up, right? So there's nothing really, magical there to understand. What I want to look at now is come down to the last kind of extreme low. So this one for me, I'm going to use as my extreme low. We can then kind of follow the same logic, right? So we had obviously the move down. We have a move up. We failed to make a new low. Right? We failed to make a new high, failed to make a new low. We then come up and we take out this high. We come back for the pullback, right? This pullback then comes out, breaks the structure. So as you can see, we're currently breaking a structure with zero pullback, which means at some stage you're going to expect a pullback, right? So things are starting to align. Smaller time frame, daily time frame for that weekly. We know the weekly stochastic is overbought. We know the daily is, kind of building some kind of momentum, but zero pullback. And we now can see that the 4 hour ultimately also has no pullback, right? So let me just get rid of these lines. Let me get rid of the brush tool. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm going to pretty much finish on this, guys, right? Because I got a couple of other things I want to get done today. And I just wanted to share this with you, in terms of walking through the process. And again, it'd be good exercises for you guys to do this for yourselves on something like Euro, on obviously something like Aussie dollar. Do this on gold, do this on Bitcoin, whatever you want to do, kind of this on. But I think the process of going through, even if you've done every time frame, if you go, monthly, weekly, daily, 4 hour, 1 hour, 15 minute, just to kind of give you some practice on this, right? So a couple of things that I'm looking at. We obviously had what I would class as a wider break of structure, although this technically is also the break of structure, right? This is probably the more accurate break of structure 4 hour. I just like what I like. Now, if you can see closely in here, right, if this clicks, if you can see in there, what we've actually got is a very, very, very small gap, right? So at a minimum, I'd like to see a pull back into this area, right? Obviously, at a best case scenario, we've obviously got this last little candle that really kind of started the process. So on a 4 hour time frame, what I'm currently looking at is this, right? Now, that's not to say I'm going to run out and take a short. What I'm saying is that even on a pullback move, these are the areas of pullbacks for me, right? So what I could do is I could mark this up as another potential option, right? I'm going to take the low there in terms of the gap, and I'm going to come down probably to the gap there, right? Which again is a pretty big zone overall, but I'd expect reactions from one or two of these areas, right? So I'll just mark this up as my 4 hour. And the beauty of this is I would then be expecting to do exactly the same thing on the 1 hour, the 15 minute, right? Now, this is just for practice rather than for doing, right? What I want to do is just to get an understanding in terms of, what we've got there, what we see in there, and why we'd see a reaction. Now, at this particular point, for H2, at this particular point, right, what I haven't done is talked about the change of character, talk about, break of structure, because at this stage, my bias is still pretty much this up, right? We have had no reason. I thought yesterday, after hitting one of the order blocks, after hitting, one of the areas up high, um, that we could have had a reaction, and we kind of didn't, right? So I think the trick is really by not having a reaction that kind of any changes the character bigger picture, is we've just got to keep kind of walking through the same process, one by one by one, until we can actually say, look, there's one area there which will probably overlap that last 4 hour. We obviously need to take out this low for it to be a change of character, right? And in an optimal world, this high right here needs to hold, right? And when I say it needs to hold, there's nothing saying that we can't sweep it, right? But a close above this now means that I'm just kind of looking at my count or my start of my count all over again. So what I'm then doing is I'm going from the 1 minute, the 3 minute, the 5 minute, the 15 minute, and I'm almost doing the exact opposite to what I've just done from the monthly, weekly, daily, 4 hour. I'm actually saying, right, we kind of at an extreme level right now. Let me see if the sentiment. No, it hasn't loaded. I'll share this in the chat channel. Actually, there we are. So here you go, right? So what we're seeing right now is retail are clearly mass short on the euro. So, we are grinding up, grinding up, grinding up. And therefore, there's nothing really changed in terms of a bias. We know where the bigger levels are based on the weekly and the monthly. A close above this level right now, and we can say that we're expecting a continuation on up. Now, if you're trading this on a 5 minute or a 1 minute, there's probably long opportunities in this, for at least a little bit longer. If you are looking for the pullback in terms of a weekly pullback, daily pullback, then what we want to see is a 1 hour, 4 hour change of character. We've just had a new high, so this new high now becomes something else, and it's basically just starting the count kind of all over again, right? So we kind of coming up to this, we're saying, right, here's my new high, the low can stay the same, and at this particular stage, until we get a change of character, the momentum is still to the upside. And therefore, all you're doing is working with the chart rather than trying to predict the chart. When I'm looking at these levels and putting things like these boxes in here, I'm not saying, hey, this is what I want, let's put an order in here right now. I'm saying when the price comes back to these ranges, I want it to give me some clues in terms of what's going on, what I can see, what I can spot. And that obviously